What is up, you guys? I am Missy Renee, and in today's video, we're going to talk about forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness when it comes to your healing and when it comes to your journey in creating the life that you want. So if manifestation and conscious creation are topics that you are interested in learning more about, then definitely do not forget to subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoy this content, so that way the YouTube algorithm will put this video in front of a bigger audience, and so that more people can get this valuable information. And this is a video that is long past overdue for making, and it's one that I have had requests about for quite some time. And ultimately, it's important to make this video because this is one of the key points when it comes to the change of self that is needed in order to manifest and maintain our desired state. This might be one of the most important videos that I've made to date, and I would definitely take notes, because today I'm going to talk about one of the most important and one of the most seemingly difficult aspects of manifestation, and that is forgiving others and forgiving ourselves. One of the most common questions that I get day in and day out talks about forgiveness. How do we forgive ourselves for the things that we've done? What do we do if we are carrying a whole lot of guilt and shame? What do we do with all the weight from all the regret over the things that we did in the past? What about other people? How do we forgive others that did wrong by us or harmed us? People that did a lot of damage to us. Because as most of you already know, when it comes to manifestation, there must be first repentance. And by that, I'm not talking about falling on your knees and praying for forgiveness. What I mean by repentance is a radical change of self. And in order to achieve that radical change of self, we must learn to let go and forgive the past and all the things that came with it. And understandably, this is not always the easiest feat. It's not always the easiest thing to do. And this video is going to be less a tutorial or a how-to, and more so just a stream of consciousness. Because when it comes to something that touches everyone so deeply, when we're talking about things of our past that have really hurt us and that have scarred us, and that have left us feeling resentment and anger and sadness, this isn't something that I take lightly. And I know for myself personally that it was certainly something that didn't come easily and effortlessly, at least not at first. In fact, some could argue that this is the most challenging aspect of this whole process. When it comes to creating the 3D circumstances, when it comes to changing our world, when it comes to changing our life, dropping the old story is a must. When we first find out about the law, when we first start studying and reading more about the law of assumption, the things we learn can be absolutely mind-bending, and it certainly goes against the grain of everything that we've been taught. And the biggest aspect out of anything else is this notion that ultimately we are the ones in control, that we are the operant power. Whatever happens to us is put there by our own identity, by our own beliefs, by our own assumptions. It is through our own mind that everything becomes a 3D experience. When I first found out about this, I had a real hard time with it. I had to really sit with it for a long time, and a part of me really battled with this notion. When I truly thought about it, when it really sunk in that everything and everyone shows up because of something that I did, that didn't feel too good at first. A part of me was like, well, wait a minute. So all of the abuse, all of the suffering, all of the things that people did to me, all of the ways that I was treated when I was bullied, you're telling me that I did that? Needless to say, this can be a hard pill to swallow, and I get it. And I am going to talk more about what I did and what ultimately helped me move past that old state, move into a new version of me. It truly is a new version of me. but it didn't come before a whole lot of inner work. And when we talk about forgiveness, it's important to note that there's two sides to this coin. There's forgiving others, and then, of course, forgiving ourselves. And I want to start first about forgiving others, because ultimately this is the biggest sticking point that comes with being able to drop that old story. The aim is to drop the old story. The aim is to detach from that old story. And whatever happened, whatever came with it, we ultimately need to remove ourselves from that state entirely. And the only way to really do this, and the only way to do it in a way that we can maintain that new desired state, is to forgive. Because to forgive ultimately means to forget, to erase, to wipe it out as if it never happened. And I know you're already saying, Missy, how on earth can I forgive this person for what they did to me? How can I forgive him for what he said to me? How can I forgive her for her actions? How do I forgive them for treating me like shit and abusing me and making me feel lower than dirt? And the only way to truly go about forgiveness is first understanding the person and the state we put them in. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first, it helps to have an understanding about everyone is us pushed out. Now, if you have been studying about the law, then you've probably already heard of this term and know what it means. But in case you don't, for anybody that may be brand new here and has never heard of the term everyone is you pushed out, definitely watch the video that I made talking about this concept. I will leave the link to that video up here, also down in the description box below. But ultimately, we must learn how to separate the other person that had the effect on us, the other person and their actions. We must learn to separate them from the state that they were in. The easiest way to think about this is to imagine that everybody in your reality is an actor. Everybody is playing this game. It is a grand drama. It is a play. And in your reality, in your perspective, in your world, you are the screenwriter. You are the director. You are the one that ultimately tells them how to show up and what state they are going to occupy. Because it all boils down to the fact that everybody that we encounter, everybody in our life, everybody in our world is us pushed out. And everyone is going to show up exactly the way that we assume and believe that they're going to show up. They're going to show up and faithfully play out the role that we gave them, because everyone is ourself pushed out. When we assume them to be a certain way, when we believe them to do a certain thing, this is how it will show up for us. Now, of course, and here's the important part, up until fairly recently, for most of us, we were all doing this unconsciously. We were not aware of the fact that it is the beliefs and assumptions that we carry that create the circumstances we experience. So if they are showing up based on the beliefs and assumptions that we carry, that also means that they can show up differently as well. That if we use the most powerful tool that we have, and that is our own imagination, they must and will show up in a way that we imagine. We can imagine them showing up completely different. We can imagine them showing up in a lovely state. We can build a lovely state for them to occupy. We can imagine them as the version of them that we desire to see and what we desire to experience. And this goes for everyone. This goes for friends, family, lovers, co-workers, you name it. Everyone in your world is you pushed out. And we are all fractions of the same whole. We are all one consciousness, playing different roles as different actors. But there is no separation as we have assumed there to be. Because in truth, there is no difference between me and you and everyone else. There is only different states of consciousness to occupy. And once you learn that difference, and once you learn to separate that person from the state that you were in, this is how you begin on the road to forgiving them. And instead of imagining what had happened, instead of imagining all of the terrible things that may have happened, all of the fighting or cheating or whatever it may be, instead imagine them showing up in the way that you would want them to appear. Now, it's one thing when we're talking about somebody else, but what if it is us? What if it is ourselves that we need to forgive? And for some, this can arguably be even harder to do. It's not at all uncommon to feel a great deal of shame and feeling guilty and feeling upset over things that we may have done. Upon finding out about all this, it's not uncommon to really feel tremendous remorse and resentment towards ourselves. How could we do this? How could we have let this happen? How could we have condemned this person to this state? I know I certainly struggled with this. I know I certainly had a very hard time coming to grips with this over what my experience was, the things that I did when I hurt other people, the hurtful things that I said and that I did when I was unaware and unknowing what I was doing. And that can stay with us. That can really sit in us and really keep us stunted and keep us in that state of guilt and shame and resentment. And it wasn't until I came across a quote from Neville that will stick with me forever, and one that I will never forget. Do not waste one moment in regret, for to think feelingly of the mistakes of the past is to reinfect yourself. And boy, is this the truth. Every time that we revisit these painful memories, every time that we revisit all of the terrible things that had happened, we are, in effect, reliving that. We are unknowingly allowing it to keep happening to us. And this is the biggest downfall that we have. This is where I see people struggling the most. When we keep that old story alive in us, we are effectively reinfecting ourselves. We are permitting the old story to perpetuate. So what do we do then? How do we go about forgiving others and forgiving ourselves? What is the answer here? In one word, revision. We need to revise it. We need to erase it. We need to truly put the past behind us. And the only way to do so is to revise it. I know I talk a lot about revision on this channel, and I'm going to keep talking about it, and I'm going to keep reinforcing this, because out of everything that I did when it comes to the work that I did on myself, revision was the thing that helped me overcome that old state. It truly helped me to overcome the horrors and the guilt and remorse of the past. Now, if you are not sure what revision is, if you are new to this concept, maybe you haven't heard about it before, then you definitely want to check out the video that I made talking about revision. I will leave a link for that one up here and also down in the description box below, because I'm not going to dive too much into it in this video, but I do want to share an excerpt from Neville's book, The Law and the Promise, where he talks about the importance of revision. Man and his past are one continuous structure. This structure contains all of the facts which have been conserved and still operate below the threshold of his surface mind. For him, it is merely history. For him, it seems unalterable, a dead and firmly fixed past. But for itself, it is living. It is part of the living age. He cannot leave behind him the mistakes of the past, for nothing disappears. Everything that has been is still in existence, The past still exists, and it gives, and still gives, its results. Man must go back in memory, seek for and destroy the causes of evil, however far back they lie. This going into the past and replaying a scene of the past in imagination as it ought to have been played the first time, I call revision. And revision results in repeal. Changing your life means changing the past. The causes of any present evil are the unrevised scenes of the past. The past and the present form the whole structure of man. They are carrying all of its contents with it. Any alteration of content will result in an alteration in the present and future. Live nobly, so that mind can store a past well worthy of recall. Should you fail to do so, remember, the first act of correction or cure is always revise. If the past is recreated into the present, so will the revised past be recreated into the present, or else the claim, though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow, is a lie. And it is no lie. When I was in the process of doing a lot of deep reflection, I kept seeing things, I kept seeing patterns, and I kept seeing my reactions to them. All of the limiting beliefs, all of these terrible assumptions, all of my insecurities, all of my fears, I was able to trace them back, as far back as childhood. And I've talked about this before in a couple of other videos, but it's important to remind and it's important to note what the process was like on my journey so that it can hopefully help you on yours. I definitely grew up in a very dysfunctional household, no question. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of neglect. There was a lot of anger, and it truly scarred me. And those scars stayed with me, and they followed me well into adolescence and adulthood. And so one of the very first things I did was I went back and I revised. I revised everything that showed up as unwanted. And this was what truly turned things around for me. This is what began to truly chip away at that old story, at those old aspects of myself. The past and all of the demons and all of the monsters that came with it. When I started to dig in and really observe myself and all of the limiting beliefs and all of the assumptions, all of the insecurities, all of the resentment, all of the regrets, I was able to pinpoint every time where it was stemming from. And it was always through something from the past. For me, this went all the way back to my childhood. Because truth be told, the old story was bad. And I grew up in a very dysfunctional household with two parents who, God love them, were not in a position where they could handle raising kids. And thus the way that they showed up was not ideal. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of abuse. And I carried everything with me from childhood throughout my life up until that point. It was the root of the fear of abandonment. It was the root of my insecurities. It was the root of my self-loathing and feeling not good enough. The reason it was alive to that day was because the past doesn't stay in the past. The past will continue to be created until we erase it, until we revise it. And so I did just that. I revised it. I revised my childhood. I revised the pain and the trauma. I began to instead imagine my parents showing up for me in a way that was loving, in a way that was supportive, in a way that really helped me to grow. And I felt that in those imaginal acts. I truly felt it. And bit by bit, I noticed a change. I noticed a change in how I felt. I noticed a change in my thoughts, in my behaviors, and how I was showing up. Through revision, I was able to forgive. the people in my life that hurt me, the people in my life that did harm. I was able to forgive myself for all the terrible things that I did. I was able to relinquish that resentment, that anger. And when I did this was a turning point for me. This was truly when I can say that everything changed. I had moved myself into a new state. I felt like a completely different person. And it's because I was a completely different person. And it wasn't just me that changed. Other people in my life started to show up differently. Other people started to show up in the way that I had imagined they showed up, in the revised memories. Some of them made a complete and total 180, night and day, from the old story, from that old memory. When I set out to practice the art of forgiveness is the day that my life changed forever. We do not have to be prisoners of our past, regardless of what happened, because again, you guys, circumstances never, ever matter. You can detach from that old story. All of the old and limiting beliefs and assumptions that were created and that were impressed, you can change them starting today. But first, we must practice the art of forgiveness for others, and most importantly, for ourselves. Once you truly begin to drop that old story, that is how we forgive. And that is how we manifest anything that we want. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, do not forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in checking out any of my other resources, I will have links down below to my one-on-one coaching, my blog, my social channels, my podcast, my new Facebook group, all of that good stuff down in the description box below. So don't forget to check it out. Also, do not forget to check out these videos over here. Each video is a different topic, but it all talks about how to create the best life possible. So until we meet next time, you guys, take care, be well, and never forget how powerful you truly are. Happy manifesting, guys.